Well, hello everybody. It's July the 2nd and I'm just starting to put together some clips to get a video out on the garden this coming weekend, 7th or the 8th or something like that. Angel's out here helping me. If you can see that lovely bush behind me, that's my David Austin rose called Chianti. I planted many David Austin roses a number of years ago now, 20 years ago or more. It's the only survivor. Very hardy, comes back and looks like this every year. It's looking a little leaned forward and the blossoms are hanging down, but that's because we had a heavy thunder and lightning storm and downpour of rain. Always seems to happen when the roses and the peonies are in bloom and they go face first in the dirt. Right now I am working at trying to salvage my lavender bed. There's piles of this around the edge of the lavender bed. I thought I had lost it completely. We had a winter that wasn't a bad winter as far as winters go in this area, but I think what happened is the extreme cold snap that we had between Christmas and New Year's and into the new year, almost 2 weeks of minus 20-degree temperatures every night, and we didn't have any snow on the ground to protect the lavender. This bed has got to be 25 years old now, and the lavender every year comes back and blooms. Well, I thought I'd lost it, but it's coming back from the root, and a few of the branches have sent out foliage from the base of the branch and whatever. So I'm now trying to cut out all the dead wood, and the horrible weed patch that it's turned into. Always has weeds and grass in it, but I completely ignored it this spring. When we get out to look at the garden, I don't know. I'm starting to feel a little better about a few things, but it has not been a good spring in the garden. I don't think I'll get any winter squash. I've only got a couple of plants left and they're kind of sickly. We didn't have frost. I planted out when I normally plant out towards in the last week of May. Wasn't any frost after that, but we had several nights that went down to 5 degrees and several nights after that that went down to 7 degrees. It just stunted everything. Even in the hupos, the tomatoes and the peppers and things were stunted, but they're starting to revive now and put on some better looking foliage, and actually some of the tomatoes are in bloom and whatever, so I'll be able to show you that. I'm not so sure that I'm going to get any corn. Corn went out, probably the first week of June, and maybe even the second week of June, but anyway, the nights were still so cold. It's only about 6 inches tall and it's kind of a yellowish color. I'll show it to you before the video is over with. But if it'll revive and get tall enough to give me any corn later in the summer, I don't know. Well, as I say, most of the clips that follow will be taken this week. There are a couple that I'll put on at the very end. I wanted to show you that monster rose bush of mine. The birds have planted one on the side of the house. I wanted to show you that, and I also always like to show the Laburnum when it's having a good year. Stay tuned, stay still, here we go for the rest of the ride here. Not a paid product placement here. Just wanted to show you the organic fertilizer that I've been using for, I don't know, 4 or 5 years, since I discovered it anyway. I'm not sure where to tell you can buy it. In this area, I get it over in Maine at a building supply store, of all places, because most of those places have a garden center attached to them. Ellsworth Building Supplies, if you're in eastern Maine here anywhere. I'm in Canada, New Brunswick, but if you're within shot of it in Maine, that's where you can pick it up at. I find it an excellent product. I've checked the labeling many times, and it does not tell you what the composition is, other than it gives you the breakup down there, 5, 4, 3, and 9. It's got an extra thing added there, calcium. I suspect it's blood and bone with some fish meal. It has a fishy smell to it, but I've never managed to burn anything with it. I really like it, and I use it fairly liberally in the summertime. Just work it into the surface of the soil around my vegetable plants, and it gets watered in as I continue watering. So that, for your information anyway, is what I use as an organic fertilizer. An overview of the hupos. I'm going to go inside there in the extra hot day and show you a few things close up. It's been a miserable year in the garden so far, but things are starting to pick up, at least in here. That row directly in front there of tomatoes, that is the San Marzano, the Italian sauce tomato. Just starting to see the first blossoms this morning, but it has been putting on some growth lately, and I have two determinate varieties. I'll show you those as well. But we are in the midst of a true heat wave here on the coast. I've been bragging all along saying it wasn't as hot here as it is in other places. Well, that went by the board. It got up to 34 degrees Celsius, that's 93 Fahrenheit here yesterday, and extreme humidity, so you know the feel-like temperature was probably up into the 40s. It's now about 10 a.m. and it's almost 30 degrees now, so it's going to be as hot or hotter tomorrow, this afternoon rather. I'm losing it. It isn't tomorrow yet. On the back wall there you can see my grapevine, which I've done something a bit different this year. I cut it right back to the main trunk, didn't leave any runners. There are two main trunks. You can't really pick them out there, I guess, but I let the canes come out from the trunk, and I'm getting those out to 5 or 6 sets of leaves and some grape clusters starting to form, and then I'm clipping the ends off of those. I don't know what I'll get out of it, but it's easier to maintain anyway. Well, let's have a look at a few things inside here. My peas have been in bloom for probably a couple of weeks in here in the hoop house, and out in the garden they're just starting to bloom. Lots of pea pods on, and they're filling out quite nicely. The variety is called Sugar Lace, an edible pod pea, so you can eat the pod along with the peas if you let them grow large enough so that there's peas to shell out. I have a question, or a couple of questions I guess, before I finish here today from my English gardening friends. You quite often refer to a pea called mange-tout, and that in French, if you don't speak French, that just simply translates as eat all of it, or whatever, eat it all. I'm just curious, is that a particular variety, or is that just a general term that you use for the edible pod peas? Because I never see anything over here called mange-tout. So that is my little thing there to ask my English gardening friends here. You can give me an explanation in the comments. This is one of the determinate varieties. This particular one is called Beaver Lodge. The other one is Sasha's Alte. Seed given to me for both of them from Kevin. Thank you very much, Kevin. What I'm trying to show here is what I consider a normal truss of blossoms, how they come out normally on a tomato plant or vine, whatever you want to call it, because I want to contrast it in a minute and show you what I find coming out on the San Marzano, something I don't think I've ever seen happen before. This is one of my cucumber vines, which is finally starting to grow. I think originally I had 15 plants planted in this long, narrow bed. I now have 7, so I've lost 8 of them. We didn't get frost, but we got days and days and days of cold nights, and it just stunted them. They turned yellow and died, but a few of them, the more hardy, have struggled and continued. And these are a European gherkin, which I still call a cucumber. This is another question for my English gardener friends here. I notice on many videos when you people refer to a gherkin, you don't refer to it as a cucumber. You grow cucumbers and then you grow gherkins. Is there a reason for that? Whatever, I'm planning to make pickles out of these. It'll be pickled gherkins, I guess. Lots of dill in here right now too, so that's good. Hopefully that shows. The tallest one in the back, and then the row of dill along the edge of the bed. Just seedlings that came up, and I've mulched with hay, but I water them and keep them going, and they're really producing nicely. So the gherkins start producing, I'll have lots of dill to make dill pickles with. And as I think I've said before, the gherkins that I'm using are parthenocarpic, all female blossoms, no pollination required. Each blossom should produce a cucumber. So even with 7 plants, hopefully I'll get a good supply of them. Hopefully you can see that. This is one of the San Marzano, the Italian heirloom sauce tomato. And it just puts out a branch all of a sudden of blossom buds, anywhere along the main stem. Sometimes they're down quite low. I don't think I've ever seen a tomato plant do that before. I'm keeping these pruned back, pruning off the suckers, and trying to remember not to prune the suckers off of the determinants, but I get in here and get busy pruning and I go over and forget what I'm doing. But I want the determinants to be more bushy and these indeterminates to just be one tall plant with ever how many trusses they get on them. The pepper plants are still relatively small, but I'm starting to get peppers on them. This is an Amish Delight. I think that's what it's called. Amish something or other. Check here. No. Amish pimento. And I think that's the one that Kevin tells me I've got to get the buckets ready for, the heavy producer. But I have several of them, and they're all producing a few at this time anyway. Well, after I thinned out the beets, in the last video that I did from in here, whenever that was, a few weeks ago, they started to come along quite nicely. Seem to need to be watered every night because they aren't mulched with straw like everything else is. The bed was just too narrow. I decided not to do the mulching there, but looks like I'm going to have a relatively decent crop of beets in a few weeks' time anyway. Well, I survived my visit in the hoop house, but I'm glad to be out of there. This is just one branch of the black currants. I have 5 bushes that have multiplied into very large bushes. Looks like it's going to be a great harvest, but they're much later here. It's usually early August before they're ready to pick. But there's an excellent crop of them anyway. They appreciated the cool weather and all the rain earlier, I guess. And this is my struggling corn crop in the corn cage here. Been in for several weeks and has hardly grown at all, and as you can see, some of the plants look quite yellow. The grass-like stuff that you see coming up is seed from the straw that I used, and I finally remembered to ask at the feed store where I buy the straw. She thinks it's oat straw, so I'm growing oats, I guess. I don't like to go in this bed in the summer and trample down the soil, but I'm going to make an exception. I'm going in there maybe this evening when things cool down with the organic fertilizer and put some around each plant. They haven't needed to be watered. That's one good thing about this straw mulch. I haven't had to do any watering in the areas where I'm using it. This is my potato patch under straw. I just added some more straw to the plants that are far enough along to do that. They'll be starting to produce little potatoes down there. I don't want them to sunburn. And it's been quite successful. I think I put too much hay on the seedlings, the seed potatoes when I put them in there. There still isn't much up in the very center, but it keeps closing in on the center, so I think there will be some plants come up in there in the next week or so. And I guess that means that they'll probably develop at different stages. Do this another year, I wouldn't put quite so much straw over them initially until they come through the straw. But I have not watered, I have not fertilized, and the plants that are up and growing are looking very good. So time will tell if there's anything underneath. They're all Linzer delicatessen, except for a few Cara that I saved over the winter and had very long sprouts on them. But I'm quite sure they're up because I remember where I planted them, and I do see plants growing there. One of the clips at the end of this video shows one of these rose bushes that the birds planted next to my house that I'm very pleased with. When I took that clip, these weren't out yet. They're not 100% out yet. I see lots of clusters there that don't have any blossoms on them, but it is coming right along. And as usual, there's lots of bees into it working it. It does have a fragrance, but it's a very subtle fragrance. You have to go over and smell it. I just love the thing, though. It produces a lot of feed for the birds in the wintertime. It's covered with thousands of tiny little rose hips, and the birds love them. They eat them all winter, and that's how they spread the seed around. I have a lot of them growing under my apple tree. I have one growing next to the house. I moved some of the ones that were growing under the apple tree and put them up by the roadside, where they'll grow up into trees and things, hopefully. Well, there's nothing to show in the 4 raised beds that are in the upper right-hand corner of this screen. There's a couple of winter squash plants still alive, but I'm not so convinced that they're going to do anything. They're stunted and they don't seem to be growing. And anyway, I don't think I'm going to get any winter squash. In the bed directly in front of me, you see 2 rows of beans. I don't remember which is which, but one row is a yellow bean and one is a green bean, both bush varieties. I think it's the green bean that is supposed to be an early variety, so I should have green beans before I have yellow beans, I guess. Probably have them both at the same time later on. There was a row of radish going down the middle here, and the best luck I've ever had with radish. I guess they really appreciated the cold weather. They didn't bolt or anything, and I got a lot of radishes out of it, but I had to pull the last of them out of there because they were going to take over the beans and shade them out. And at the back there's another row of the same peas. I don't know if you can pick out blossoms on it, but they've just started blooming. So once they are finished, I hope to put my rutabagas in that bed. They're up. They're just tiny little 2-leaved seedlings right now, and there's no rush about putting them out. Last year I put them in too early and had 10-pound rutabagas. So anytime towards the end of July I think we'll be all right. This bed was the one that was supposed to be garlic, and there's a half a dozen garlic cloves that came up in there. Probably not going to amount to anything. But I planted 4 of the summer squash, yellow crookneck squash called Delta, in here. And the 2 plants, as you can see in the foreground, are much larger than the 2 that are in behind. I think I'm showing them all, aren't I? Yeah. But it looks like I'll at least get some summer squash out of things. And actually looking down inside of those 2 yellow plants, you can see where there are blossom buds that are starting to come up. This is that round raised bed thing that I bought last winter sometime. And it's got broccoli growing in it. 6 plants, I guess. The white that you see on them, I just dusted them with Dipel, an organic pesticide that kills the cabbage loper, the cabbage moth worm, because I'm starting to see some holes in the leaves. It doesn't kill on contact. They still have to eat a bit of leaf, and it kills them after they eat some of it. So I think it's a ground up microorganism that, something that's millions of years old. They mine it somewhere. But anyway, it's an organic product. I've used it for years, and it does work very well. These are the Alpine Strawberries that I brought out of the hoop house where they had been growing very early this spring, transplanted them in here. They've done very well. I'm not so sure that they'll overwinter, but that's a thing to worry about later on. Quite a few blossoms there now, and I've had a few ripe ones. This is one of the 5 strawberry plants, variety Fresca, that I grew from seed. I managed to bring through long enough to get them in the garden. I'll put a little clip afterwards that I took with my iPhone here a couple of days ago, eating my first ripe berry. It has amazed me that these things grown from seed are producing already. The 13 bare root seedlings that I had arrive earlier this spring, there are 3 or 4 that still look like they're alive, but they're not doing anything, so I think they're a write-off. My first ripe strawberry, and it's growing on one of the plants that I started from seed. Quite amazing. And delicious. On my way over to show you my hascaps, but I had to take a little clip of this. It is a dianthus, something in the carnation family, and it is called deltoides. I had it in one of my garden beds many years ago, and now it's all over my property. I just love seeing it where it pops up in various places, throws its seed around, and comes up in the strangest places. This is just outside of the strawberry bed here. The rose bush from the other side, still on my way to look at the hascaps. I hope those are in focus. I'm back now taking a second clip. The first one that I took was I thought I was showing you hascaps. There wasn't any in view at all. I have a lot of them on my 3 bushes this year, the best I've ever had. I just wish someone would tell me how I tell when they're ripe. As I've been putting it, they have lots of pucker power. These things are very sour, and they're looking nice and blue. I test 1 or 2 every day because I don't want the birds to beat me to them, but so far I wouldn't pick them to do anything with them. They're very sour. Well, that will conclude this part of the video. There are 2 or 3 clips that follow that were taken earlier, a couple of weeks, or no, 10 days ago or so, I guess, when I started this particular video. I'll tack them on to the end here. But I will say thank you very much for watching at this point, and move on. Well, this clip is about how the birds can improve your garden. In the foreground here is a very overgrown Weigelia, and I just recently heard that pronounced on a video where the W was pronounced as a V, so now I'm curious as to what the real pronunciation is, but this thing has been growing here for many years, and beautiful. It just gets larger and larger, and I don't do anything to prune it back. But what I'm talking about is the white flowers in the background. If you watch my videos, you know that I always show this rose bush that's out by the cabin that I started from seed, and it is now enormous. It's not in bloom yet. This particular one was planted here by the birds. They brought the seed from that large one out back and dropped it here. I wasn't aware of what it was. I kept noticing it over the last few years and never bothered to crawl up in there. And it's an elevated bed. It's about 4 feet off the ground. And the older I get, the less I like to crawl over in there. I thought about removing it. I said, it's a wild rose. And then finally, late winter, early spring, I had a thought. I thought, well, that might be one of the seedlings from my rose bush out back. So I did go over in, and using some large construction staples, I fastened the some of the canes, some of the vines on it to the side of the house. And sure enough, it took off this spring. This side of the house has a southern exposure. So whenever the sun is out nice and warm, it's just like a little heat sink here. So it's in bloom long before the one out in the garden. The one out in the garden's got thousands of buds on it, but probably won't bloom for another 10 days, 2 weeks yet. And as you can see, it's now covering over a window. As soon as it finishes blooming, I've got to get over in there again and rearrange some of the canes on the thing. But it's just beautiful. I love it, and it's popping up everywhere in the garden. I'll give you another angle on it here. All of that growth that's up over the windows, that's all new this spring. I just had it tacked on the side of the house below the window, but I definitely have to do something or I'm going to lose the window. But I would love to see it cover the whole side of the house. Wouldn't that be beautiful in bloom? If you've watched my videos much over the years, you know I show this every year. It's a laburnum. It's sort of biennial. It blooms every year, but every second year it puts on a really good display, and that's what it's doing this year.